Good afternoon. Welcome to Social Workers in the Trenches with Barbara, Alexi, and myself, Zoe.
Reminder, this is a podcast for educational purposes only.
Today, we're going to be talking about a topic or phrase, aging in place. And what does that look like? Now, I work with seniors, so my view might be a little different. But today, we're going to have a real conversation about what that means for individuals that's dealing with health issues and have to focus on aging in place.
My understanding of aging in place term really means that when you turn 65, now an old individual who has set of needs and now may need more support services around you.
Let me ask you
I,
something. When did you start thinking about what life would look like as you get older?
right.
Like, where do you want to end up? Like, what does that look like for you?
Be honest with you, I never thought of that because I'm white and then kind of questioning, well, what does it really mean when we getting older? And then what change for me is to start thinking about every year we celebrate new birthdays. Every year we're getting older, and then you feel like you want to become more adult. You want to make more decisions because you feel like, oh, my parents making decisions for me. Somebody else making decisions for me. Right? I want freedom. I don't want to come
Right.
home at 9 o'clock in the evening. I want to go out and stay out till like 12, right? And so decision making and wanting to decide for yourself and not, ask for permission someone else to do things, I think you kind of want to become older. Once you're an adult and want to start having kids, now you're that parent who says no. And then you realized from that perspective, the moment you started making decisions for somebody else, and I'm responsible for this person's life, right? And so you want to make the best decision possible. And so you start looking from that perspective. And now you went into social work. And in social work, you start making decisions for other people or helping them to make decisions about their
Decision.
life, right? What kind of care they need to receive, or if they became hospitalized and now they have different needs that they didn't have before. And now they rely on somebody else to getting dressed, cooking, go shopping. And now
Right.
they have to file application. They have to file for insurance, who's going to pay for that service. And now that all of a sudden the decision making and then the circumstance changes and you find yourself, oh, I need to start asking other people to help me, or I have to ask government to pay for the services. And now
Mhm.
they making decisions where I'm going to be. Now they make a decision, should I receive care, how many hours I should receive. And that makes it you're no longer independent.
Or in control, right? So I think for me, when I think of aging in place, I work with a lot of seniors, as I said before, and for them, they want to stay as independent as possible in their own space, right? So unfortunately, several things happen and several things could be true at the same time. You can age in place in your home as safely with assistance, as you mentioned, whether it's assistance from family or home care, or you can end up in a community, an assisted living community, where you're now agreeing to stay there for the rest of your days and aging in place if the facility or the community have the right environment, I would say, or the right services to help you age in place appropriately. Now, for me, I think most of us do not think of aging in place because we can't even think about 10 years from now, much less when we're 90 or 95. We don't know what that age will bring, right? We don't know if we're going to be independent. We don't know if we're going to be able to move around freely. We don't know. I think we need to start thinking about these things because at the end of the day, if I know I don't want to live in a nursing home, which I don't, I have to start making sure I put plans in place to make sure that I don't end up in a nursing home.
What about you, Barbara? When you hear a phrase aging in place, what comes up for you?
So, I think I had mentioned something like this to you before. I feel like I'm in a sense already planning when I think about possibly leaving the city, I say, "No, I can't do that because I don't want to have to drive to get a gallon of milk." I don't want to have to walk upstairs at 60 and possibly fall. So I feel like I've already been thinking about these things, I need convenience from here on in, and just for the little things. I don't want to have to rely on anyone. My children will leave soon, I hope. And I just, I want to be able to move around. I've always felt that way. I've always felt like I want to be independent forever. I'm a pretty healthy person right now. If anything were to get to that point, I would still like to stay in my apartment. Again, I think about the older generation in my family, and my grandmother's almost 90, still lives alone. She has a home health aide, but she's still alone. And she always says, I will never leave my apartment.
Oh, wow.
And I want to be like my grandmother. I don't if I can, I would like to stay independent.
Right.
If I can't, I would accept the help because we work in this field and we see the outcome of getting very sick and not being able to take care of yourself. If you need the help, take it. Yeah. Who wants to think about that though, right? And these
Yeah.
conversations never really happen. That's why I asked you earlier, have you started thinking about this? Like, do you think about aging in place and what happens if you fall and break a bone and you can never, you know what I mean? I'm already thinking that way. I had a
Yeah.
friend invite me roller skating and I said, no way. I am the age that I am. If I break a bone, it will not heal. And I cannot take risk like that. I cannot go roller skating. I'm sorry. I need
So I
my
still
You
do
will,
limit.
ice
you
skating.
will heal,
I mean,
Barbara. It will just take longer. It will just
right.
take longer. You will heal. I have people that's in their 90s breaking hips and bones all over the place. And guess what? It takes them a little while longer for the bone to heal. Um, and sometimes they become very afraid. And that's what happens, right? You have the fall, something breaks, then you become terrified of re injuring yourself. And that is the crippling effect, right? Because then you become seized up, that fear paralyzes you. So I say, even to myself, do the things you love to do.
Right. So I still do ice skating. I still do. I mean, and with my girls, and I think things could happen. It fall, it get hurt, but life continues to live. We don't
Mm.
stop because there's a risk. The risk is
Right,
everywhere. I think
right,
the part of aging, I think the term itself, aging, feels like old. And
right,
It
if
does.
we say like when we were born and parents celebrate milestones, right? The first
right.
year, like the person walked, right? 10 months, 12 months, then 1 year, like great, 1 year, then 2 years, 3 years. And every year we're like, oh, it's child's growing up so quickly, right? We use really a positive language behind it. It's about growing up, learning new skills, learning the language, being open to new experiences, right? And then all of a sudden, somewhere down the line, we turn to 40s and we're like, no, we can't do this, we can't do that. And we need to start thinking about our bones, and if they're gonna fall and fracture and so forth. All of a
Mhm.
sudden, the switch to the negative. I think if we decide to change word aging in period and says, no, we all age, every year we're getting older. Doesn't matter if
Right.
it's 0 or 90. Same process happening with with age, new experience that comes in. So it becomes more about experiences. And now, can we have a conversation about different experiences?
Mhm.
Experience being at 20 may be different than 30, and then 30 will be 40, and so forth. But it's not about anymore as age per se, but rather you learn some things, you learn new skills, you learn new information, you start some things happen which stops you to think. You read something which and then change how you think, right? COVID played a large role of how I think about medical care, or how do I think about just rules and regulations in general within our society when decision being made because they felt of safety and everybody's safety. But that decision was made on top and nobody asked me, in my opinion, on that. and there was a different, and then all of a sudden people have different ideas come along, what safety means, and then how do you protect everyone and protect yourself, and then distance and masks, and then later on you learn that they didn't really work and it was just all made up. And I think circumstances change how you
Mhm.
think and how you experience, right?
I have a question for you. Do you think so? When people mention people that don't work in the field, when I do have conversations about aging, I'll hear people say, I never want to go to a nursing home,
Right.
never want to go to any facility. They treat people like crap. I'm too afraid. Who knows if they'll really take care of you? I've heard horror stories, and working in this field, I've seen some things that I've questioned at times when it comes to a person's autonomy, right? Sometimes workers feel like they know better than the individual. So perhaps, maybe the conversation should be like how we know we're aging. How do we set ourselves up to follow our plan? Like the plan we have for when we get to that point.
Right.
And it's just like when we talk about, proxies and caregivers, we always talk about planning. And I
Right.
know in an ever changing world, it's hard to do that, but it's not a bad idea,
No,
to maybe
no. I think several things need to happen, just like the conversations about the proxies. Something like this need to be put in place, right? So again, if you have the money, you can practically plan out and
just
buy and set up whatever you want to. But several things come into play. When I think people need to start making decisions when they're in their right mind with no dementia, no Alzheimer's, no cognitive decline, make the decisions when you have the money and you know what you want and your brain is intact. Because here's what happens a lot of time, there's no decision made, there's no conversation, and something happens where you end up in the hospital or you end up in the have to go to rehab, and then the family says you're not safe to be home on your own, right? You cannot go back to your home independently because aging in place suggests that you're going to go back to your home and you're going to independently as much as possible with some assistance be in your home in your preferred environment, safely managing yourself with some level of autonomy and independence, right? But if the situation is the family deems the social worker, the administrator, whomever it is, wherever you are, whether in the hospital or the rehab, deems that you're unsafe to be in your own environment. Okay, you broke a hip and you have to walk upstairs and you can't make it up the stairs. um, Mentally you're unstable to the point where you cannot make decisions, you've been wandering, you've been leaving your apartment, all these different things. That's when the issue is okay, this person might end up in a nursing home, this person might end up in an assisted living, right? Because now the family is chiming in and saying mom, dad, or making decisions because they're the proxies and saying we have to make this decision and move you out of your home for your safety, right? So I would agree, Barbara and Alexi, that the conversations need to start happening as soon as you think to yourself, what do you want? I don't want to be in a nursing home. I want to be able to stay in my home or have my kids take care of me. Now my kids are like, no, they might be like, no, we're not taking care of you. We're going to send you to the nursing home. I have to make sure now I have the money and I have the documented somewhere that says I would rather stay in my home with care. I do not want to go to the nursing home. So if you put it in writing, they have to respect those things, right? If you have the money, you're setting up the finances where financially you're going to be able to get care at home managed with the assistance of the family or the government, whoever. The point is, once you start putting pen to paper, your rights has to be respected.
it's making
Right.
me think all the people out sorry, Alexi, of all the people out there that are doing it alone.
Yeah.
Like how many people we haven't kind of discovered that are out there doing it on their own. I met a man outside a few months ago. He was an older gentleman, and he was asking me if I had any money so that he could buy an avocado.
Wow.
And that broke my heart, you know? And I really had no cash, and I was just like, "No, I'm so sorry, I don't have any." That made me think of God.
An avocado.
That could be me, right. What if I, just the simplest thing, and he had no money and he was walking alone, and, you can't save everyone, but it does make you think about that
Right.
population.
Right.
It's like, what if that's me one day? What if that's,
Right.
you know?
Which then brings back to the another question. Does the person has support system? Throughout life, right, we may have burned bridges because we did something, we didn't like something, we said something, people get offended, and then the relationship breaks down, communication breaks down.
Mhm.
And then that leads to being alone. So that's a part of it. If we start thinking about systems, well, what do we need for our living, right? You've mentioned staying in the home, transportation. You've
Right.
mentioned um, income. We've mentioned access to health. If you're in a rural area, you may need 2 hours to drive to the nearest hospital or a clinic,
Right.
or not have a specialist available. You may have to go to the city if you have a new health condition. Or if you're in a big city, is there public transportation? Then the question becomes, when do we plan it? And when do you start thinking about aging? And why this question came
Right.
up to you, right?
Right.
Initially, I said at 45, because before that, I didn't think of that. I didn't consider getting older or
Right.
Mhm.
right. And then as I started, and then because I joined the social work field, I was placed in the situations where I started observing people and their
Right.
situations, and then trying to help to navigate healthcare, social care, and then or sometimes even having conversations with their family members about
Right.
their needs and wants and preferences, right? And then all of a sudden you're realizing, well, wait a second. You need so many things to end up being in the right way to have successful,
Right.
healthy
Right.
aging. And sometimes it doesn't always go by plan. But if we start somewhere, then we need to figure out, well, what do we need, let's say, from a housing situation, transportation situation, from what I care more about, what I don't care about it, what I need
Mhm.
most, or I don't need the most, right? Do I need to be driving until age of 90? Or what kind of supports I would need? Uh, and yes, we cannot think through every single scenario, but we start very simple with current basic needs
Basic.
today. And you just
Right.
start writing them down to say, well, like if I need transportation, where do I go? How do I get it? And what do I like about that? So the really question becomes, does a system that we're part of needs to adapt to the person's life? Or does a person have to adapt to the
Mhm.
system?
Well, we know
Wow.
the answer to that question right now.
Right.
Get it?
I mean, right now, what we're seeing is that people have to adapt to the
The
system.
system.
It's not adapting to anyone.
Right.
And that's the hardest part, right? I mean, no one person has the same situation, and you come across all these crazy things sometimes, and you almost feel like you're being put up against a wall, like
Right.
Mission Impossible. The system, it's one way for everyone, no matter the need. Why?
Right. So I was just saying that what I'm finding is more and more people are going through these situations and they don't have children or they don't have family. So they're aging and they have a cousin or a niece or a nephew, no real immediate family. So at some point, I find that you will need to trust someone to say, hey, Alexi, would you like to be my proxy? Would you like to be my POA in real time when you're 45, when you're 50, when you're 60, when you're 70, right? Asking someone who you trust to step into those roles and being completely transparent because that's another thing. If you're asking someone to be your POA, you have to be transparent about your finances and you got to give them access to those finances. Because guess what? God forbid something happens and you need to transition from your apartment house, wherever, to a facility like a rehab or a nursing home or assisted living, guess what? You're going to need someone to advocate on your behalf and know what is in the bank account and know what funds are available, right? The issue what I'm seeing is a lot of people are not having the conversations and they're showing up in 80, 90, and they need help. They no longer can go back to their homes because they broke a hip, they broke a leg, they broke an arm, and they're unsafe in their homes. Now a decision needs to be made. And unfortunately, they're angry because now I have to give up my home. But I say if you talk to someone in advance and have the steps, okay, if I have to go to the nursing home, I need it to be short term. If I have to do X or Y, I need it to be short term. If I can afford it, I want to stay in my home with care. And this is how I would like it to look. And this is how I would like it to be. Those conversation needs to start happening earlier than later.
But
That's my
but
view.
let's
Let me ask
circle
you a
back a little
question.
bit
Oh, sorry.
because you did.
I met someone the other day and I asked, I said, "Do you have a proxy?" And this person said, "No, there's no one. There is no one. I don't even think about proxies because I know there's no one for me."
Oh wow. That's so
So,
sad.
I mean, let's not forget about that population, right? We can talk about, I mean, yes, there are people that have money and this is all figured out and they'll be fine. There are those
Right.
that have their families. What about the people that really don't have anyone?
You could write it out and share with the doctors, medical professionals who are all part of your support
Mm,
system and want to let them know about my care needs,
mm,
wants, and needs. But the question I was asking is a system designed to affect person's life or a person has to adapt to the system. And system means housing, system means nursing
right.
home.
Well,
And then as we talk about functional needs, because everything that we do, it's through our functions, right? And then as our functions changes, the need to access the services changes. And then how do we think about those changes is going to change as well. If the system designed in a way that we have to adapt to it because we're seeking assistance from it, then when the crisis happens, are they preventive or are they a crisis reactive?
yeah,
And the question becomes, well, why should I even plan it? Why should I plan those things? And I think the conversation is not really about the end result. I think to me at least, it's becomes more about if there is an emergency, what do I do? If
right,
it's a natural emergency, how do I solve that? If there's a medical emergency, what would I like people to know? And how do I address
right.
it? If there's a legal emergency, who do I call? Sometimes it's just basic planning and just kind of
Yeah,
putting things in place and then going back and review it. And then when things do change, I deal with that. And I could then change your planning. But planning in itself, um, especially in terms of how do I protect my housing, how do I protect my finances, my job, my income source? How do I
Hmm.
protect if in case I need transportation? So you start thinking through the process of protection of myself and my needs
hmm.
Absolutely.
because the system itself is not gonna think that way.
No, no. And it's about making a choice. It's about choosing when you have the ability to choose. When you're in the nursing home or you're in the hospital hooked up to machines, you sometimes, unfortunately, are not able, you're not cognitive cognitive enough to make a choice. So unfortunately, when you can make a choice, make the choice. Have the conversation. Even if you don't have family members, find a friend that you might trust.
Mm.
All right.
Sometimes they're just, sorry, Lexi. There are people that just don't understand how to navigate the system,
Mhm.
to ask, when to ask. So I think that's a big issue as well.
Well, if you end up homeless, right? Let's think about from a
Mm-hmm.
different perspective. I know we talk about nursing home and
Right.
hospitalizations. Homelessness, not the results. That you woke up today and you have no home. It's a process. And if you start thinking from that perspective, you miss a paycheck, you are able to pay your rent, or your rent went up and you cannot pay. So you start thinking about what do I do and try to work out payment plan with the landlord or stop paying at all, right?
Mm,
And then after a while, you have a housing court, and then if you miss that, then marshal comes in and then asks you to leave, and now you're
mm,
homeless, right? So those things could happen if I found someone in the good court, got the paper, and now I'm eligible to receive one shot assistance. And as going through the process, and I ask for assistance and I'm not getting it, right? Or I'm in queue. And then it gets overwhelming because if I don't submit paperwork, if there's a missing page, then I get declined and then I am going to shelter. And then at that moment, I no longer in control, technically, no longer and I have to follow directions of that shelter system.
mm,
And then if they pick where I need to live, if I have on top of that, if I have substance abuse issues, if I have mental health issue, right, that
Right.
mm,
unravel to
mm,
the point where I just said to myself, I don't want to do this anymore. And then I'm now at their control because now they saying to me, you have to do X, Y, Z. You have to go to substance abuse program. You have to
mm,
be in treatment to receive care, to receive housing. And you're no longer in control. But at one point in life, you still had the control and you still had that opportunity to set that plan in place. And maybe things change, but again, having a plan, it helps ground you, in my opinion. Because when you're in a crisis, you don't think
mm.
literally.
Right.
Act.
Right.
You're acting on the crisis mode.
I was just gonna bring up an example. As a social worker, sometimes you find yourself fighting against the system. I know
Yep.
someone did everything right, and he was told by a social worker that she put in an application for a 2010E. He was waiting, waiting. Finally, I had to go and do some investigation work, and we find out that the application was never submitted. And so now we're starting from zero, and this person is desperate and they're a mess. I mean, I think you're right. People should plan, or people, when life is good, but I don't think that most people think that way, which is why it's so important that we do talk about planning. But
Right.
most people just don't think that way. When life is good, when you have a good job, everything's going well, you kind of stay in that mentality where you're indestructible, untouchable. And then, we deal with systems, and that's a whole mess. Like, we can put it on a person and say, maybe you should have thought about this, maybe you should have planned, but sometimes you're just fighting the system. It's the system that's screwing you over.
Yep.
We as people designed this. Somebody decided to think about, "Oh, how do we support each other in case of crisis?" And I created a system so people could access it. And then we developed rules and regulations around it, right? And somebody decided that we need to have a government agency to take a look and look over opposite, housing, right? And then we created housing authority to help to individuals that do find themselves in different struggles able to find assistance. And then it became bureaucratic a bureaucracy of paperwork and submissions and a process that becomes alienating at times and
Hmm.
to individuals who looking for assistance. You start experiencing similar things like you have. What would you
Mhm.
change? And how do we make it accessible?
It's a matrix.
We were born in the matrix. We were born into our parents, and our parents make decisions on our behalf. And they told us what's safe, what's not safe. They told us where to go, where not to go. They put parameters. And then the child says, I don't want to do that. Right. And they start questioning. And they start saying, no, I don't want to do this. And we say, no, and we punish you. And then the similar thing now we're experiencing in the social work, social services,
Right.
and also medical care, right? Is because
Hmm.
they putting parameters of what you can and cannot do, and if you
Mhm.
act out, if you disagree with them, then you be labeled something else. So
Mhm.
Right.
the question becomes, that all our society is created by within those blocks, and as we move from one block to another block, and as our needs change, we still need access to address those needs, those functions.
Right.
And then we're going back to the circle because now we're kind of circular. Because technically speaking, then if you didn't think of something and then crisis happened and you now need a home care or you need a wheelchair or a walker, if you don't have health insurance, if you have a health insurance, they'll pay for it. Now you have to get it to the doctor, get the prescription, right? They have to approve it, then they deliver it to you, and so forth. Now, all of a sudden, you have a case manager that's follow up with you. You have I know, a doctor or somebody from the doctor's office calls you,
Right.
like with an appointment. Now, you have to make life within those parameters, and then the question becomes, what kind of life I like to have. If I have this chronic condition and things change, what kind of life I like to have control over.
Right.
Right. Because sometimes it's so sudden that today you're fine, and then next week you have this condition, and you're like, what happened? Right. And again, as I said, sometimes you're not even aware of something happening because cognitively or physically you're unable to be present to make decisions. Right. So I think, we do a lot of advocating for people. We need to also advocate for ourselves. So when we see laws, when we see regulations, when we see things that just don't sit right, that's not right, or it's not serving the population in the way that it should, or it's designed in a way claiming to do something that it's really not doing. We see this a lot in housing. We see this a lot in health and wellness, different things. I believe that as soon as you can start thinking and start reasoning and start spending some time with someone you love, no matter what the age is, as long as you're over 18, as long as you're over 21, and you can start genuinely thinking about, what do I want my life to look like? If I end up in a situation where I have to go to a nursing home, or I'm unable to make decisions for myself, what do I want?
And this is how we start advocating, right? Like we have to start having conversations with people, spreading the word, saying, hey, have you thought about your aging process? What does it look like for you? Do
For
you even
you.
that means? I think it's up to us, right? We need to start these conversations, and just spread the word. I mean, that's how things happen. That's how information is spread. We start talking about it and bringing it into the light, and forcing people to question the system, and just question the map of their life in a sense,
Right.
right? Like if I had people directing me in the right way, I think a lot of things in my life would have happened sooner, would have turned out differently. And that's just a gift. Now that I know better, that's my gift back, right? Like I need to give back and I need to start having these conversations.
Right.
And as a social worker, I mean, some people, they're like Barbara's stuff because I don't hold back. You're right. We do have to advocate for ourselves, but I find myself advocating a lot within the system against other social workers, case managers that I'm sure are overwhelmed, but that maybe don't know how to be unbiased
Right.
at times. Yeah, I'm a fighter. I think
Yeah.
I tell my clients, this is exactly what you need to do. This is exactly what you need to say.
Right.
Sometimes that's all you can give them because
Right.
you're up against a wall. There's really
Right.
only so far that you can go to
Mm-hmm.
them and saying, this is how you're going to navigate the system. This is what you're going to say. This is what you should start thinking about. And hopefully they're spreading it to the next person.
Because then it becomes about dignity. It
Right.
goes back to long-term stability,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it's about staying connected and able to manage the daily realities of different situations people find themselves in. And I think planning becomes that foundation. If you know
Right.
what you want, you know what your care preferences are for yourself,
Mm,
it's easier to advocate, and you inform someone, this is what my needs, this is what my wants, this is what my wishes are. Because then it makes it easier for other person to advocate on your behalf because you
Mm-hmm.
know what's the point of reference is. The hardest part is trust because
mm,
we lose trust quickly. And most times when we meet people, they've gone through different individuals and different agencies,
Mm.
and they have not find the connection. They did not long-term
Mhm.
stability that they felt they're going to be promised, and they always find themselves in crisis situations. And at times when you asking for help, and instead of getting help, you find yourself questioning: Is it me, or is it people that I'm being connected to?" And that makes it difficult. And it goes back to type of support I'm looking for. And if you feel like we rush them through, then this process of aging becomes more difficult and challenging because they want the same thing. They want to be healthy. They want long-term stability. They want to be able to make decisions how they see fit, right? They want to have other people to respect their wishes and their preferences when they making decisions about them. And so
Right.
the question becomes planning itself. It's not about decisions making about them. It's actually decision making with them, right? And that's a change in how we see things, how we think and see these individuals asking for assistance. Because I feel like it's easy to say to the person, you had failed, you had your home, you're homeless now. Well, too bad. And now you're asking for me to help you. And so here are rules. You want
Mhm.
it, you have a safe place to be. You don't want it, well, then go back to a place you were. Sometimes we find our individuals within that scenarios. And other times they have a fall, a break, and hip, right? As an older person, now they go into the rehab, nursing home, and now they stay there long term because they can't come
Right.
back. Or because nobody paid their bills 6 months and now they have no home to come back to.
Right.
Because
Right.
the other part of it, which I don't think people realize, if you receive SSI, you need to notify SSI when you're in the hospital and in a rehab facility.
Mm-hmm.
Have to stop the payments because you're
Right.
no longer in the community. If
Right.
you don't do that, they will penalize you. Once
Jesus.
you, as we talk about planning and financial planning and people understanding the benefits and so forth, if nobody knows that and nobody called in to this Social Security and says, "Listen, this person is in a rehab facility for 6 months. Please stop payments." But then who's paying for the rent for those apartment?
Right.
Exactly.
And so a
Right.
lot of people end up losing things, not because they didn't have enough finances to pay for that, or nobody else, or there
No
was
one
not
Mhm.
stepped in.
right
Mhm.
step to do that because nobody knew about it, didn't think about it, and then within the system of the nursing home, nobody actually set them down and says, "Oh, by the way, she's receiving SSI. You need to call this number right now, and they'll stop payments. And by the way, how are you paying for rent, and who's going to pay
Mhm.
for rent?" That would be the person who is at in intake in the nursing home as you go through the process of rehabbing should
Right.
ask
Mhm.
that questions because the trust starts with if we have individuals, social workers, or anybody else in this field of assistance, we should know those systems. Because
Right.
if you come through the door, I should be able to tell you based on your situation or what should be expectation would be and what they should look out for and ensure that's been taken in consideration and then act on it.
Mhm.
And we as individuals that part of that, we help them to create a plan and help them navigate it and ensure that they protecting themselves and also help them to understand if one thing is missing steps and where they're going to end up moving forward.
Right.
Process is in place.
And they have to make those decisions. But you would be helping them to do that. And I think
Mm-hmm.
what happens a lot of times, nobody usually says it, and then there's no discharge to go to
Right.
because
Mhm.
they
Because
Discharge.
sometimes, yeah, sometimes what happens is that you're speaking to the social worker the day that you're planning to leave the hospital or planning to leave the rehab, and it's like, is the person appropriate to go back home? Are they safe to go back home?
And
So it's like for me, I work a little differently. I try to start having the conversations immediately when the person ends up in the nurse rehab or in the hospital because I need to be updated in real time. What's happening? I
Mhm.
need to know, can this person return back home safely? Is this person appropriate to come back to the community? Are they safe to go back to their home, whatever the home is, right? So a lot of times, if there's no family, we're the ones that start making the wheels turning to help that individual. If they have family, we want to start talking to the family to make sure that things are put in place appropriately for that person to come back to be safe and independent as possible in the community or in their home. A lot of ownership is on us to keep talking, to keep sharing, to keep advocating, to keep doing our best to help those who obviously need a lot of help.
I was going to say is that the discharge is actually one of the messiest times, right?
Yes.
Because the client could be lying to you. They could
Right.
easily say, I'm fine. And most times they're just going to get discharged as is because they said they're fine.
Right.
I don't.
Because you don't know the living condition unless
Right.
there's
You
someone
don't
to
know what's
tell you.
going on. I mean, at some point you have to, you have to make the call. I mean, but
I don't know
if
if people want to leave the hospital. They will say everything's gonna be all right because something happened in the hospital setting
Mm.
that forced them to say, "I need to go," and I feel like that's why they choose to sign themselves out.
Amen.
But then the other situations, they were given medication and the medication didn't work. And then nobody listened. They were saying this medication doesn't work. Or that medication put them to sleep. And then once they recognized there was a problem with that medication and they changed, they'll start out like, okay, now I regain myself. Now I want out
Mhm.
because the mistake was already made. We may not
Mm.
always be able to say why we want to leave because there's a fear that if I tell them the truth, they will never let me go.
Right.
And so they have to make a decision about, again, how do I say things? If somebody sat down with them every single time and just listen and ask them questions about their experience, where they are, because hospital is where you come in a crisis, and hospital is not for healing, it's just addressing that need, that moment. And once you address it, then they discharge you so you can get healthier somewhere else. And that's what the plan is, how to get you healthier somewhere else.
right.
But if somebody sat down and then ask simple questions about food, about your home, about transportation, and people around who you support, they will know specifically you live on a 50th floor walk up,
Right.
or I just lost my job and I lost my insurance, I have no medication, or whatever, and or I'm experiencing mental health crisis.
Mm.
Or so, and then, but if people listen and just don't ask those questions on those 5 areas, they'll have more information that could help this particular individual.
Right.
So it is about taking time, in my opinion,
Absolutely.
I
truly,
agree.
which no one has anymore. Everybody has a speed system
Mm-hmm.
where you come in, it's like being part of a conveyor belt. You come in, you assessed, there's the next person. They assess you, they give you medication, say, okay, goodbye. Next,
Mm.
right? And then 50 people like that. Nobody sits down, nobody steps back or think about, hey, do you afford this medication? Do you have other medications? Are you on any other drugs, supplements? Does this medications have any side effects and so forth? No one think through those processes. They just give you because that medication should work for you for this condition and then send you home. Hopefully the pharmacist will, if you don't have multiple pharmacists, and you go to one, and if you have other medications you're on, hopefully they'll catch that and says, "Oh, second, you're on this two medication, that medication, you cannot take this medication, and let me call you doctor and change this." Right? If nobody does, then and again that becomes part of what type of
The
support system
issue.
you have. Where so that goes back to sitting down and then talking about it or asking questions because I
Uh-huh.
think that's I think that's the key. Having someone, like Barbara had mentioned earlier in the conversation, if somebody just set me down and give me different options and let me think about it, then maybe I might have made different decisions, all right?
Right.
And maybe today I would be in a different place.
Mm-hmm.
And so I want opportunity to give people a chance really to sit down and have these conversations and just to start thinking about my preferences,
Right.
or how do I make myself stable, or what would I need for long-term stability. And maybe that's a conversation. That's what we are, trying to set up. Just slow down
Mm-hmm.
and get to know the person that we're sitting across, which is difficult when you have 50 to 100 cases if you're working,
Yep. Yep.
right? But I think three of us in this call have done it regardless what our caseload looks like. We took our time, we pulled the person aside and just listened and build a relationship and
Right.
then ask them questions and let them to think about their wishes and their needs and how they could communicate those things to other individuals. And then they change how they start seeing things. And now they want more. And now they know how to say things and how to get that.
I
Right.
think we just have to touch it's one life at a time, one person at a time. And, while we still have breath, keep advocating, keep speaking, keep connecting, because that's the only way I think people are going to start listening and start planning and start trying to put things in place for themselves and their families.
So I guess the message is if you haven't thought about aging in place, and if you haven't made plans, start making them.
Right.
I mean, I am.
One conversation at a time.
And so this is concludes our conversation about aging in place. If you like it, subscribe. Thank you.
Have a good night.